Hi guys, my name's Subtutor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain, and welcome back to another Warframe lore video. Now, today, considering I referenced them a lot in my breakdown of what Ballas said, I figured we would go and jump to... where is it? There it is. We'd go jump to a relay, go and talk to, not Simaris, because no one wants to talk to Simaris, really. Guy doesn't really understand personal space. But we'd go and take a look at his unlocks for synthesis, all of the different lore unlocks, and we'd go through them. Just because that way, like, I was referencing them a lot last time in the video on what Ballas has told us and all the other stuff, and there are also a whole load of other little nuggets in there as well, which kind of stand out as being really useful for our understanding. My cape has phased through my stomach. That is not... There we go. That's more like it. But so as a result, I want to go through that first and take a look, and then depending on how long that takes, then maybe we'll go take a look at some of the other codex entries and things as well. But I have a feeling that's that this might take up more than enough time for a video. So let's go in and talk. He's going to lunge at me. No, go away. No, no one likes you. No one likes. That's right. Back off. But who's the target this week? Fat Grenadier dude. Okay. Is this... Nope, this is the wrong side. We want to go to this side. Here we go. Okay, so we've got all of these unlocked as a result of going around and doing Simaris' bits and pieces to hunt down and scan certain individuals. Now, you've got the other Simaris stuff, you've got the rewards, and you've got the other bits and pieces. I kind of wish they would do more of these, where it gives us a very specific type of enemy. We have to go out and find them, and then once we've found them and scanned all of them for the specific imprints, we get the imprints, gives us more lore that is in some way kind of related to the individuals that we're scanning. So the first one we've got is a pretty standard Lancer, and we've got the people who seemingly have done the most scans on it, or who got there first, I'm not sure which. But anyway, the smashing is like music. Pfft, crack. My machine's striking pin rams... Shut up, Simaris. My machine's striking pin rams the rock in front of me. A rush of bits crumbles from the rock and rolls over my boots. I see glinting in the rubble. I like it when it shines. It means I'm serving well. I thrust my shovel in, its plasma blade slicing clean through the chunks. It vibrates, so I switch on its inducer and the shiny bits clink on. Then I throw them into the sorter and jump out of the way for the next strike. Puff, crack. More rumble, more shining. This is a good day. All of us shoveling to the beat of the machines. Only a fraction of a cycle left on this rock. Days, really. I keep thinking, what will the next rock be? What will the next rock be like? The outer terminus has many rocks. Good rocks. I like it here. I shovel again and jump out of the way of the next smash. The machines stop and it goes dark. Why have the machines stopped? Why is it dark? A voice reverberates all around, a thundering whisper, nearly framed. The rock shakes like never before. Gravel rains in the dark. I choke on the dust and struggle to find my balance on the shifting ground. The voice booms again. It is in the air. It is in the rock. It is in my head. Merely shaped they are called. My ears ring like sirens, and I hear new smashing. It is coming from down the tunnel. Not rhythmic smashing, not the music. Something else, and I do not like it. There are other voices too, screaming voices. They make me think the way we scream when there is an accident. When one of us gets caught in a sorter, there is much screaming. The voice grows louder. There was no their mother. Out of the darkness, a new light rounds a distant corner and shines down the tunnel. Our lights do not look like this. It is a part of something big and moves wildly. Running? Yes, running through our line. Our machines fly up and then slam back down. Miners are smashed and crushed into pieces. I am scared. I am angry. Why is this happening? Is it an Orokin? No, we serve the Orokin. The Orokin are golden. This is something else. I pick up my shovel. There was no their father. The light is close now. I find my footing and grip my shovel like I do when I chip ore. The light sends a machine flying at me. I jump, but I am too slow. It crashes into my chest and pins my legs to the floor. I am trying to breathe, but cannot breathe. I look up and the light charges toward me. I raise my shovel just before it tramples into me. There is a clink. The light catches itself on the shovel's blade, forcing the shovel's butt deep into the hard ground. The light explodes under its own force. All is black. For a moment there is silence. I pull on the shovel, but it is wedged between the ground and that thing. Then the shovel pulses like it does when I strike a shiny chunk of ore. Without thinking, I flick on the shovel's inducer. The voice screams. Everything shakes. I like hearing this scream. I do not know why. I use everything I have left to force the shovel in deeper. The thing reels back. I can feel it running. It is running away. Everything goes quiet again, so I close my eyes. So far, we've got a Grineer, subservient working within the Orokin Empire who is mining for them and finding seemingly either gold, considering there's so much of it around in Orokin structures, or some other precious metals or something like that to be used. And something that is screaming about being merely framed, merely shaped, they are called. There was no mother, there was no father. Which could be a lot of different things, but it could be Ascension, it could be potentially something worse, like a rogue Warframe even. But we'll get more into that in a minute. But ultimately something has come in, it's been wrecking the mining facility, it's been taking out the individuals that are there, and this one manages to hit it with a shovel with a plasma-based blade and turn on this seemingly magnetic inducer that causes it to have a freak out and run away. Over here, I found one. A wave of pain rushes through my chest. My eyes dart open. There's a light. I try to get out of the way, but I cannot move. The light shouts, "Hurry, he's not going to last very long." I try to talk, but a new voice speaks instead. Doesn't matter. If he can survive that, then we want his sample for the next batch. They are lifting me onto something. I catch glimpses of shimmering gold. This is a bad idea. I mean, would you trust a Grineer soldier? The figure presses something into my arm, and I want to sleep again. The new voice laughs. Do we have any other choice? So this is where they start pulling. So the Orokin have turned up, dressed in gold, and they've started looking at using the most resilient genes from everywhere to put them into. In this case, it says the next batch, which might be Grineer soldiers, the low guardians that have been mentioned before. It could be into the next batch of warriors generally, i.e. adding Grineer genes to Dax, the next batch of Dax soldiers. Or it could be the resilient genes that then go into the slender and queer new forms that then get turned into Warframes. So there's that. Now, in regards to the thing that this was shouting, it's interesting, because merely framed, well, Warframes, sure. Merely shaped, they are called. Okay, well, fine, so they've been called Warframes, they're shaped in that way, but they have no mother and they have no father. So this could be a Warframe, considering that in some of the Prime entries, which I'll go over in another video, the Prime Codex entries with the lore on, There's a suggestion that they are seen as angelic. They have light flowing off them. We see our own powers as kind of pyrotechnic light displays. So, it's there's that. Although, why would it be yelling this? Why would it be here? Was this something found within the rock? And also, we don't tend to communicate telepathically in this way. We are known to be mute, and so this sounds very much more like ascension than not. Hey ho. So the anti-mower, which is one of the proxies, it fires a little grenade and it causes annoyance. We've got these guys who found it first, or did the most scans. Good for them. How long are you going to tinker with that thing? Father asks. He's one to talk. Ever since we entered this junk belt, all he's done is tap on that console. This whole time he's just sat there, eyes fixed on the radar, dirty fingers tapping the drum beat to some manic song with no structure or rhythm. I ignore him and try to go back to work on the robot. Father's tap gets faster and more intense. Is he trying to get to me? I can't concentrate. Tell me again why we don't just approach at full speed from open space. Couldn't we just slam into the rail and punch? I ask. Because that's what we used to do. Because that's what we used to do. He's annoyed, but at this point I don't care. Our convoy of transports has skulked through this junk belt for days. The view screen, an endless parade of rock and garbage. We could have been through that rail a long time ago, I said. Maybe, he shrugs. And why can't I ride an Impulse ship? This again? He snaps back. You know why. Umpal is my best and only friend. There weren't many young people in the group, and Umpal is the only one close to my age. Truth be told, he was the only person my age I'd ever met. He was on another transport. They said it was for security reasons. We are on a trade mission, my first time outside our node. These trips were dangerous, but Father said it was essential I learn the business. The whole convoy is loaded down with items we have scraped together through months of local trade, but it was mostly salvage, with some ferrite spread between the different transports. Rumour was that Umpal's transport might even have some Rabido in the hold. We were heading to another survivor colony a few nodes away. They had other rare resources, but more importantly, they were close enough to the sun to grow food, and that was what this mission was really about. Before we left, Umpal and I drew wires to see which one of us got to bring the robot we were building. I won. It was bits and pieces of scavenged Orokin tech slammed together, but it was a robot and it could walk. Father didn't think much of it, but I was proud. I hoped to trade it for some rare parts when we hit the colony, enough to build a bigger second walker, maybe even one that could carry a full-size cannon. Does this look anything like you remember from the Orokin days? I ask in a futile attempt to break the tension. That thing? Yeah, we had ones that walked on two legs like that, but his finger stops its tapping and he takes a look at the robot before continuing. But they were different. Don't you miss it? I ask. What? He says. You know, the Empire. I don't think about it. He's back to tapping on the nav console. What about your corpus? Don't you miss them? Your father? I say. Orokin didn't have parents like you do. It was done differently then. He takes a deep breath and turns to look at me. Listen, the corpus who raised me are dead. Do you know why they are dead? Because of the plague, I said. Because they couldn't forget the past. I survived by worrying about two things, today and tomorrow. That is the only reason I'm alive. That is the only reason you exist. You want to remember something? Remember that. Yeah, okay, I shrug. He's given this speech before. I had learned the hard way not to push things when he got like this. I go back to working on the robot. After a few minutes of silence, I hear him exhale. Look, we're almost at the rail. After the punch, you can go over to Impulse Transport, okay? I nod and smile. Okay. The next few hours go quickly. As we get closer to the rail, the density of obstacles in the belt increases. The ship's nav module calls out course correction after course correction as we dodge debris. I watch the other transports in our convoy do the same. Our progress is slowed to a crawl, but Father swears avoiding detection is worth it. I'm trying to splice the connection deep in the robot's chest cavity when the alarms sound. The radar screen lights up. I look up to see one of the other transports veer off course. Seconds later, something crashes into their hull. There's a blue flash of electricity and their ship goes dark. Then two more crashes and two more flashes. These are Interceptor Pods, a grenade trap. My father jumps up and begins yelling instructions to our nav system. Full power, take us up and out of the belt. That's Umpal's ship they're boarding. His face collapses into a frown. It is. They'll kill him. We have to do something, I plead. We keep going. They can't take us all. I can barely hear him through his clenched teeth. Umpal is corpus to us. We can't abandon him, I shout. We have to. That's how we survive. His voice grows louder. What if it was us? Wouldn't you want them to? His fist slams the nav console as he whips around to glare at... It whips around to glare at... I assume that's supposed to say me. What are you going to do? Fight off the Grineer with your mower? I look down at the robot, a mess of parts and wires that can barely walk, let alone shoot. Neither of us say another word. Out of the view screen, I watch as Umpal's crippled ship, now swarmed by Grineer, shrink into the blackness. Okay, so in this regard, we learn a few things. Firstly, the corpus, the individuals that left the Orokin Empire. Well, firstly, this isn't seemingly too long after the fall of the Orokin Empire. Secondly, we find that the Grineer have very quickly taken control. They've very quickly dominated certain areas and started preying on people. But some of the more important things, and this is some of the stuff that I was talking about before, is in regards to having a corpus. Corpus, family, or at least give or take. Closest thing that Orokin had to family, born from a gene seed and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, Orokin didn't have parents like you do. They didn't biologically reproduce. They cloned themselves. They were born from gene molds, as Ballas told us. It was done differently then. And then he seems to have a lot of issues around this, with the aspects of survival, the trauma that seems to have followed afterwards, and it's a case of interesting stuff. The plague that's being talked about, I'm assuming, is the infestation. But again, you've got a lot of other stuff going on that seems to suggest that once everything broke down, again, why everything would break down purely because a collection of leaders was killed. We've seen that happen in real history numerous times. Leaders would engage with a situation, they would do all manner of different things, and then if they happened to get killed, then someone would fill the power vacuum. It might mean the making of sweeping changes, or it might mean something much, much less than that. But overall, you've still got that society that continues for a substantial period. There has to be much, much more than just a few leaders getting killed. And the executors, to at least a couple of individuals who were kind of executor level or higher level, survived. Most prominently, you've got Ballas, obviously, but otherwise there seems to be something about the emperors that got killed that is so much more substantial than we have evidence for so far, because everything just collapsed after they got killed. And then this piece in particular is the one that highlights that Corpus are family, and that moving on from Corpus, it's in the Orokin Empire, it was a case of them being gene molded, grown, developed that way, and not a case of straightforward biological reproduction. So, there's some interesting stuff there. Some of the questions then though come around. Well, what about children that would be biologically created? Was that only a thing outside of the Orokin Empire in some of the other smaller colonies that were kind of tangential to them, places like where Orden Karis came from, or that were more tribal, or was there something else? You know, was there a place for those? Anyway, next one, Eridan Eviscerator. With these chaps, scanned it first, most, whatever. The faces of the survivors, all lined up for evacuation, were etched with confusion when the lift doors closed in front of them. We descended to the hum of the lift flying through the tower. I turned and smiled at Avantus. I was beginning to believe you were going to bring them all with us. Nonsense, Bilsa. That's simply not feasible, Avantus replied. You know we need to find safety and establish the Congress of Executors. We have no time for a rescue mission. Besides, those people know their place, and they just did their duty. I will see to it they are honoured when our Orokin Empire returns to glory. We were safe for the moment. When the infestation took over, the entire tower went into lockdown. Avantus's executor status meant that she, and by extension I, were among the few people who could move freely about the massive vessel. When the lift slowed and I overrode the controls to keep the doors closed, we listened for what seemed like forever. Do you hear anything? I said. No, I don't smell anything either. Let's go, said Avantus, raising her pistol. The door opened to a darkened room. The light of the lift illuminated scattering figures, but this wasn't the infested. We were still alive. You there, step forth, Avantus commanded, and out of the shadows came several burly figures. Grineer soldiers, I said with an almost childlike excitement as others joined them. Grineer workers, useless to us, said Avantus. Despite everything, she still looked glorious in her full regalia and golden Syandana. Have you not been taught protocol? I shouted. An executor stands before you. The workers look at each other puzzled, and then the biggest one kneeled and bowed before us. One by one the other Grineer followed. Avantus shook her head in disbelief and went to the nearby console to turn on the lights. We were in a mechanical workshop. Tools in cases lined the walls, and supply crates edged the room. That precept said the hangar is through the next hall. Avantus stepped around the still kneeling Grineer and toward the rear doors. No, stop, protested the big Grineer. Danger! We kept walking, but sure enough, when we got close to the doors, the doors shook and moaned with scraping of claws. Those imbeciles, Avantus cursed. They said this sector wasn't compromised. It doesn't sound like that many. Can we fight through? I asked. What? Just the two of us with pistols and no corrupted? She snapped. What about, I motioned to the Grineer workers. With no weapons, there's not enough of them to be decoys, she said. We paced in silence until one of the Grineer, that big one, ran to a tool case on the wall and tried to force it open. Avantus noticed this and waved her hands over the nearby console to unlock the case. The rest of the workers rushed over and grabbed the big grinder saws and plasma cutters. They put on safety equipment as if it were body armor. Always wanting to cut something, I see, said Avantus to the worker. The big one nodded and smiled. Did he have any idea what those things might do to him? They lined up shoulder to shoulder against the door, while we stood a few paces behind with a couple more at our side. The infested thumped and howled. They could sense us. Their stench penetrated the door and attacked our nostrils. Avantus looked over at me. Bilsa, it goes without saying we won't be sharing that ship with the likes of these. I gave her a sideways look. Why would she say that in front of them? Oh, child, they do not have comprehension, she laughed. They are content to do the job they were bred to do. Only now they get to cut infested flesh instead of scraping metal. I look at the Grineer. They did seem unfazed. Grineer work, commanded Avantus, and the Grineer revved up their saws. I opened the hall doors and the wave of infested crashed and collapsed against the solid wall of blades. Viscera pooled at our feet. A monster would tear one down only to have another Grineer take its place. "Move," she yelled, and the Grineer wall marched forward, a line of death that eviscerated anything in its path. We reached the hangar doors at the end of the hall and prepared for the worst. On the other side could be hundreds. Avantus gave the Grineer a moment to shake the guts out of their tools and catch their breath. Then she nodded for me to release the locks. We all braced ourselves as the door opened to nothing. No infested, just a lone ship and on the other side of the massive hangar. Relieved, we sprinted across the open expanse. As we approached the ship, Avantus said, "Bilsa, you open the shuttle," and then added quietly, "I'll make sure we don't have any guests for our trip." I went to work at the nearest console, and the Grineer encircled me to fend off any possible threats. Avantus stood at the ship's entrance with a few more of the grunts guarding her. "More coming," she pointed at the swarm of infested charging from where we came. "Grineer, attack them, go," she bellowed. The Grineer stiffened, their blades roaring, but stayed their ground. Incensed, she cried louder, "I said go now!" But the Grineer did not move from the shuttle door. "It's open," I shouted, turning just in time to see the biggest Grineer drive his saw right through Avantus' spine. The high-pitched whir of metal on bone masked her screams, and she collapsed on the floor. Her pearl-white robes were now dyed crimson. Her dead eyes looked through me. I started to run, but was struck in the face and knocked to my knees. The big Grineer loomed over me. "Now you work for us. Make the shuttle go." Okay, so again, we've got a few different things here. We've got the fact that you've got an executor that has seemingly been in a situation whereby an Orokin tower has been overrun by infested, kind of like the derelict missions that we see in the game at the moment. But it's hard to tell when this is, considering what's going on. But it almost seems like, considering some of the discussion at the beginning between Avantus and Bilsa, that they had retreated to this tower post murder of all of the emperors, because they need to find safety and re-establish the Congress of Executors, because this is them still trying to kind of take control again after the demise of the emperors in the first place, seemingly. So we've got that, but then also we've got this weird situation between Bilsa and Avantus, where is it? Avantus' executor status meant that she, and by extension I, were among the few people who could move freely about the massive vessel. So it seems like Avantus is obviously an executor, same level as Ballas. With Bilsa, however, Bilsa seems to be a servant of some description, possibly a member of Avantus' corpus, which would make sense if they're genetically identical. If her executor status allows her to the various accesses, then fine. But then her closest kind of clone, I guess, would also by extension have that pass kind of that status as well, because there would be very little to distinguish between them. Which would then also potentially suggest that where before I was saying you've got people of you've got the emperors and you've got those of executor status who are consuming Kuva, who are immortal, and so on and so forth, that maybe it's not just those limited number, but also their kind of entourage. So in this case, Bilsa seems to be very much attached to Avantus as not necessarily a secretary or something, but as another member of their family, as another member of their corpus, and so they seem to enjoy the same benefits that Avantus does. But also, it stands out that at this point, the Grineer, at least some of the Grineer, were becoming aware enough to know what was going on, and they were taking advantage of the various situations. Also, we now can point out, considering that they're saying, oh, well, we don't have any corrupted, They don't have any creatures controlled by the neural sentry. And the interesting thing that stands out to that is, so even when the Orokin were in charge, the neural sentry would still control things in the tower as a military security force for them. But who would be infiltrating the tower to get taken over by the neural sentry? You know, there's a couple of different instances where her referring to them and saying that, well, we don't have any as a security force to keep us safe is a bit odd, you know. But again, that's neither here nor there. It could be just a fact that they used to potentially put prisoners, penal kind of penal system where they'd be handed over to the neural sentry to control them as a security force. Who knows? But again, this is one of these times where we see an executor, an Orokin, actually die. So where we had Ballast talking about them being above death and all that kind of thing, here we're seeing them like get wiped out completely, like dead, gone, you know, and that is, you know, arguably something that would be quite concerning to the Orokin generally, because it's obvious that they can still die unless we see through Ballast, through apostasy, through sacrifice, as we learn stuff about the Warframes and Lotus and how Margulis and Natar kind of fit together to make Lotus and all that kind of thing, which seems to be what's next up for us. If there's a way to bring back the Executors, Ballast might be looking to do that now. You know, where you've got a destabilized solar system, you've got the moon that's come back, you've got the Warframes that are operating, the Emperors are long gone, the Sentients are back, but still in a very weakened state comparative to how they were before. You know, is there an option for Avantus coming back? You know, we'll have to see about those kind of things. Anyway, next one, the Corrupted Ancient. And now this one is interesting, and I want to raise a couple of things as a result of talking about it. So again, we've got the guys that found it and dealt with it first, or most. She's dead, said Dax Menz, growing impatient. No, she's not. I knew it. Our shuttle touched down in the ancient city centre of New Uxmal for the second time in 2 days. We rushed to the entrance of the lower chambers, a labyrinth of tunnels carved into the rock. Behind us marched a full complement of bodyguards and mowers. Menz asked again, how can you be sure? We've been connected for a century and a half, I'm sure. It felt odd to be speaking aloud about something that Rembala and I had always just kept between us. That feeling of attachment, that anxiety that welled up within one of us when the other wasn't right. That emptiness I felt when I thought they had killed her, and the joy when the connection came rushing back this morning. When we were twins bred for purpose, cloned and then modified so that we could both interface with the Laura device. The Orokin had a visage imbued with variation, beauty and symmetry, but we had the Laura nodes protruding from our right temples. Their skin was silken. Ours was weaved with ribbons of metallic fascia that snaked around our bodies and into the Laura device, embedded in our palms. We made them uncomfortable, and they made that known. That is, until they were sick or hurt, and then we were their saviors. That never bothered me, though. I loved my sister, and we had each other. I wasn't about to leave her in the middle of this nightmare. Hesitation was building in Menz's face. I had command authority, but if he balked, the soldiers would follow him. I need to force his support. If you were Tenno, there'd be no question. The betrayers. He stopped himself. Look, Rambala's gone. The infested killed her yesterday. We both saw it. His frustration was building. Damn it. This was supposed to be a relief mission. We can't... It still is a relief mission, I interrupted. You want to go back to retire, Mens, or are you still a Dax? I knew that stung. Mens stiffened. He'd been cast aside before. He wasn't about to let duty slip through his fingers again. Mens stared into me. Are you willing to risk becoming one of those things for a feeling? I nodded. The answer was yes, for this feeling. Very well, Loris Donteller. Mens turned to his squad. Ready up. We entered the subterranean passage. Weapon lights illuminated chiseled red stone as we marched deeper into the blackness. Past shops and apartments all carved into the rock eons ago. This city was as old as Mars's atmosphere. Everything was silent, save the occasional snap of bone under a soldier's boot. 3 days ago this was a busy thoroughfare. Now bloodied scraps of clothing littered the route like confetti. We emerged from the tunnels into cavernous arcade, the old market road. This was where she had led me. We're close, I said. Here they come, shouted Dax Mens, and the creatures began to drive us from every door and window, all teeth and claws and eyes that looked so familiar. What kind of animal has eyes like that? Square formation, Mens commanded. When we backed up to a wall, and the mowers moved to form a perimeter, with the bodyguards behind them and me in the middle. I closed my eyes and focused on the device. Through it, I could feel each one of the bodyguards. A sergeant was slashed through the leg, and I directed my energy toward him. His wound closed and he resumed fighting. Acid spit burned another soldier's chest. I pushed energy to her, eased the pain, and reversed the damage. She would live. This was so much harder without Rambala. Another soldier was bit on the throat. He's dying. There was nothing I could do, so I eased his pain and let him go. The rate of fire slowed. Had we pushed them back? I opened my eyes to see the mower's beams incinerate the last few attackers. I was drained. I wasn't a combat lorist. Rambala and I were relief workers, used in disasters and outbreaks. Not this. I felt a surge of that familiar connection. Rambala's energy pulsed through me. She's coming, I shouted. What? Dax Men's head whipped around to look at me. I don't know. She's coming from that direction. More infested, shouted a soldier who motioned to the same exit. A mess of figures shambled forth. These were different, bigger and slower. I could feel my sister in there somewhere. It was so strong. The mowers opened fire. I wanted to tell them to stop, but how could I? I felt plasma beams burn the creatures, and I felt Rambala heal them. Why? Multiple connections now. I felt her many times over. It didn't make sense until it did. She was one of those things. She was those things. All of them. They took our fire and kept coming. I felt her. No, them. Shudder as bullets ripped through flesh, and then as flesh was made new again. They were Lorist infested. My sister the healer, remade as monster, and here to kill us. More rushed in. I felt the healing in them too. I focused just as the first wave broke through the lines. Mowers were toppled. Soldiers were tackled. Teeth tore flesh. I was overwhelmed. I couldn't control it. Their pain fed through me and I collapsed. Something's jaws latched onto my foot. Infection pulsed into my veins. And then I felt it. A new presence. Another healer. I'd felt this before. Was it? It couldn't be. I opened my eyes only to be blinded by an intense flash, followed by a crash with 1,000 crystal goblets all shattering at once. All went silent. The infested were dead. I felt nothing. I felt nothing now. My eyes adjusted. I was surrounded by bodies. I saw something run away, a streak of silver and gold. It shot straight up the cavern wall and out in the sunshine above. I didn't have time to think. I took a breath and a wave of pain surged through my body. The infestation had already taken my leg. Soon it would claim the rest of my body. I didn't care. My sister was gone. This was my time. A shadow cast itself over me. I looked up. It was Mens, alive. He stared down speaking, and then unsheathed his massive combat blade and raised it high above his head. "Men's wait," I mumbled. "I'm sorry." With sudden and sure force, his blade sliced down and through me. I contorted with the pain. His hands grabbed my shoulders. "Heal yourself." The adrenaline must have struck at that moment, because I bolted up, still stunned. He had cut the infected leg clean off. Damn it, Ontella, Menz was shaking me harder now. "Heal yourself." Instinct took over, and I snapped into focus and sent all the energy I had left through the device and down to the wound. I stopped the bleeding and neutralized the remaining toxin. I nearly passed out. I had nothing left. Menz hoisted me onto his shoulder. "I'm taking us back to the shuttle." He began to walk out of there. A few scattered survivors and robots pulled themselves along behind us. As we approached safety, I coughed and whispered to Menz, "I can feel her again." "She's dead." "Yes, she is." Okay, so this one is really interesting because firstly, we find out that twins were essentially bred as this connected unit, and we know that they're from some of the stuff about the Grineer Queens, which I'll go into in another episode of this, that there was some interesting stuff that the Orokin saw around twins, because obviously they were weird, especially if they were grown in a tank together. But then we've got the Laura device, which seems to be some kind of psychic healing element, and the nodes protruded from their right temples, and it snaked down seemingly the right side of their body into their palms. Now, this would explain a few things. Firstly, the corrupted ancients and the ancients generally, the infested ancients, all have those big arrays around their head, and then they all have really elongated right arms. Now, who else has a really elongated right arm that we've seen more recently? Ballas. There seems to be a connection between the powerful technologies used by the Orokin to one extent or another, and this weird elongation of the right arm. But they apparently weren't particularly keen on twins and on these individuals that used this Laura device, until it became a case of them needing healing and needing help. But ultimately, at some point after this is again taking part at some point after the fall, because she's poking at this Dax soldier to get him to do what she wants by comparing him to a Tenno, and him being kind of disgusted by the idea. And so, she makes a point of it. They've all been bred for purpose, and she's trying to get him to follow up on that purpose. But then we learn some more interesting stuff as well. Firstly, these Lorists have some kind of psychic connection, which is interesting. And they seem to work together to achieve the greatest result. But more importantly, the infestation, this is the point that the infestation took hold and started to create ancient healers. And it seems to be that the something of individuals consumed by the infestation remains. And this is probably why you've got the infestation referring to itself more often as like we, or in a more plural sense, because there are so many minds that have been consumed by the technocyte and brought into this kind of mass, if you like. But apparently that was where they were able to pick up this ability, ingest it and replicate it, and then that element of Rebala, of Ontella's sister, remained. She could feel her energy. She could feel her presence in those infested, and that's kind of interesting on a couple of different levels. Because firstly, she's recognizing a very specific person that's then had their capabilities as well as their kind of familiar imprint on this person, I would suppose. Because she says that she only really feels Rambala, not that she could feel other Lorists. So it's interesting to keep that in mind. The other thing is, she says that she can feel another healer, and then it comes in, sweeps in, murders everyone, and is gone in a streak of silver and gold. So Trinity turned up, I assume, and murdered everybody. Which, again, if you had a Lorist that was then put inside a Warframe, not even necessarily a twin Lorist, but just a Lorist full stop that was then put inside a Warframe, that would explain Trinity. But it would also explain other Warframes, for instance, like Equinox, where you've got the seeming twins and this duality, having them work in different ways and tested in different ways, being separated and then brought back together, would be a very interesting way of having that work, because that would be a kind of case of another experiment that they had run. But anyway, guys, I'm thinking that what I might do is actually pause it here, because we've got 3 more to go, and we're already pushing like 45 minutes now, and I don't want to get into more and run over again for like over an hour again, like the last one was. So what I'm thinking is, we've done the first set of these so far, we're over halfway through, and we'll tackle the other 3 in the next one. So thank you very much for joining me, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts and theories as well, for comparison's sake. And otherwise, I will see you in the next one. So take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, then please drop us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care.